Hello everyone, this video is on the standing meditation or just standing in general. So I'm going to give you 11 points of practice that you can utilize in your standing Qigong meditations or any time that you stand. You can use this video to kind of get a little bit of an understanding of how you stand and what are the effects on your mind and body and nervous system. Qigong is excellent in that it's very pragmatic. We're practicing things like standing, sitting, lying down, and walking because those are the things we do all the time. So when we develop a practice around them or a conscious process to make it more effective and easeful, we can carry that out into our day-to-day life. So let's start off with our roots. Let's start off on the ground. Let's start off with the feet. So we want the 4 points of the foot planted firmly on the ground. So there's 2 points, the medial on the inside and the lateral on the outside of the back of the heels, as well as the pads or the balls of the toes. Once again, medial and lateral, 4 points planted firmly on the ground. Depending on how we have historically stood and moved our body, we may have a little bit of leaning in towards the medial or the lateral, or maybe even dominant towards the posterior or the anterior, depending on which way we tilt, lean, and if we're in center. So by having a practice where we basically stabilize ourselves from the bottom up, we're going to reorganize the entire structure of our body. Now, we don't just align our body, we're also aligning our mind. And what that means is how we hold our body influences how we think and feel. So when we think about the feet and we think about the legs, that's our connection to the earth. That's our sense of stability. If there's any locking of the joints in the knees or any off-centeredness beginning at the bottom, we're going to basically organize the whole foundation of our whole body-mind so it's off-center. So it's important to start at the feet and make sure we're grounded in, connected to our souls, connected to the earth. Let's move up to the knees. The knees are slightly bent. This is really important. No locking of the knees. I know that's sometimes offered in certain yoga asanas, and many people do it unconsciously as they stand. They'll lock one knee and then they'll offshoot their center of gravity to one side. We don't want that. Not in Qigong practice and in general, not in life. The general principle there is don't have any locking of the knees or any joints. We want joints open and relaxed. What that'll do is allow for circulation and energy flow, both energy as in qi, as well as circulation as in blood flow and lymphatic flow. So key principle there, keep all of the joints open, knees slightly bent. Coming up to your hips, a few things on the hips. We want the hips to be sunken down a little bit. So drop the hips down and weight the hips. So it's a little bit of an energetic cue here. The spine, we want to have the bottom half of the spine, kind of like the lumbar down, weighted, as if heavy, as if there's a heavy ball being hung down from the bottom of the tailbone, and it's causing some weight, some pull down there, so that the bottom half of our body is rooting down. The top half of the spine we want growing up. And there's the central point. So bottom half pulling down, so the hips are sinking. And then when we get up to the back of the head, we want the top of the spine rooting up. So what we're doing energetically, we're doing it also with our body, but much the same with our mind. We're basically elongating the spine, half going down to the earth, growing down, and half ascending up. So hips weighted down. There's a big controversy, as with any of these tips. I should give a little preface here. This is the way that I've learned them and practiced them, and I often practice some a little bit different, but many teachers will tell you this is the way and this is not the way, and they'll be in complete argument with one another because they'll be saying the opposite thing. So there's a lot of talk in yoga as well as in Qigong about what we should do with many of these things. One is the tailbone. Should we tuck the tailbone? Should we keep it neutral? Or should we flare the tailbone out? I'm telling you, it doesn't really matter in a certain sense. And yes, it matters in a certain sense. I will say, if you're new to Qigong, do it the way one of your teachers tells you, experiment with it long enough so that you know what it feels like in your body. And then if you're going with a specific lineage, keep with that. If not, feel free to experiment. It's all about what works best for you. Know that every time that you move your tailbone in a small way, it's going to change the entire structuring of your body above and below. So these are not things that we should just gloss over, but we want to have a lot of experimentation so we know what actually works. So that we're not simply just regurgitating things. This can get controversial if you're part of a lineage and you're carrying it on in a certain way, but most people who watch this video won't be. There are different effects of the tailbone. One of the things that happens when we tilt the tailbone is it helps us to engage the pelvic floor, and it causes, I'm blanking whether it's an anterior or pelvic tilt, doesn't really matter at this point. It's going to help to straighten out the lower curve of the spine, so bringing it out of the natural curvature and bringing it more towards a straight back. Some people say leave a neutral spine. There's a bunch of little pieces there. I will say, as we're on the tailbone and the pelvic floor, I feel it helps me to tilt the pelvis or to tuck the tailbone. It helps to keep the engagement of the pelvic floor, which is another point, slight engagement of the pelvic floor. You want to basically have a light level of tone in all of your internal abdominal muscles. Your internal unit, the muscles of the core, comprise your diaphragm, your multifidus down the spine, the pelvic floor muscles, as well as the transversus abdominis, which like wraps around like a belt. This is inner, so these are deep muscles. They're not the external rectus abdominal six-pack that you see. You want to have a level of tone of these so it's like a pressure cavity that you feel inhaling, expanding in all directions, exhaling, compressing and contracting, changing the pressure in this local region in Qigong known as the lower dantian. In terms of just basic standing, this is your core, this is your center of gravity. Having a strong core gives you balance in your whole body, and once again it's a foundational piece, just like the feet, just like the legs, that helps to stabilize everything. The next point is the spine, and I spoke a little bit about this. We have a movement where there's a moving down, lower half of the spine, and an elongation top of the spine. We want our spine long. The key that I'll offer here is awareness of the spine. Awareness of the front, back, sides, top, and bottom of the spine. The spine is the information highway. This is where all of your nerves are sending information to and from the brain. So it's important to bring our conscious awareness, which is like a light, and shine the light of our awareness through the entire column that is our spine. And we'll have more access to the information being processed there, which is being processed at multiple levels, at multiple major nerve sites, which correlate with the chakras. So spinal awareness is so key. The next one is moving up. We have our shoulders. Now, this is one of those ones in yoga. I've seen it done in multiple ways. One is external rotation, or a turning out of the thumbs, which is going to have an effect of opening up the heart. Now, this is done in yoga, traditionally in Tadasana and others. But this is not what I've seen recommended in most Qigong, maybe some. But it's typically more of an internal rotation, or simply neutral arms, but the back of the shoulder blades are rolled out. Not so much so that it's like when you have poor posture and everything's collapsed in, but they're rolled out, giving a kind of depression or moving in of the chest. This is a little bit different than yoga, which, without going too deep in here, we're often using an ascending pathway of yang energy up the Sushumna Nadi, which when you open up the chest in this way, it's going to be more lifting for the energy because you're lifting and opening. Whereas the turn of the shoulders and the depression help with what's called the microcosmic orbit, which is the energy system that's used in Qigong, where you basically circulate energy up the back of the body and down the front. So it's a circle, whereas typically, I'm speaking broadly about a very vast science of things. And typically in yoga, you use the Sushumna Nadi, a linear pathway going up the spine, and you're going up and down. Whereas Qigong, we're often using the microcosmic orbit, and you're going around, so we change the shape of the body so it's more conducive towards that circulation of energy. Once again, there's many different tools of Qigong, and they all teach it a little different, but the rolling of the shoulders is something quite common there. So you can play around with internal and external rotations. It's going to help out your fascia, and you get a sense for in your body what feels good for you. I prefer to do this a lot of the times, even in yoga. I'll do my Tadasanas as such, but experiment, experiment, experiment. What I will tell you is that the shoulders are relaxed and they're not held up really high and really stressed out, contracted. They're relaxed. In general, your limbs and everything that is your appendages are kind of like moving down, whereas your whole spinal cord moving up, particularly from the middle of the spine up to the top of the head. So these going down, these going up, because they're not so much that like you're pulling them down, like they're relaxed, but there's an ascension force that's moving up the spine, which is holding it upright, so that when you practice for a long time, you don't begin to slouch over. As we go down to the elbows, they're of course open. Key point here is we get to the hands. Hands, once again, typically are held open depending on what you're doing, but typically open because we want to open up all the energy channels. You have 6 meridians that are related to the hands, and you want to be able to feel the space, the infinite field of Wu Ji, and the energy fields that surround the body. So we want to keep everything open, and of course all the joints in the hands, so we have multiple joints in the fingers. We want to make sure to consciously open all those. In terms of energy centers in the body, your nadis run through, and then in each one of your joints there are more nadis, so that when you open your joints, you're allowing the energy to as well open up. Moving up to the chin. Chin is tucked, but not simply just like tucked down, and not overly tucked, of course, which will just cause a forward head bend. We want to tuck it down, and then it's like backing up. See how this backing up? So what I'm doing is, it's a slight tilt down, relaxation in the jaw, and then tilting back and up, which is going to elongate the back of the spine and then lift the back top of the head. You can play around with that one, and I've hardly ever seen it, but sometimes there is also a recommendation for a chin lift if you're doing something like doing an eye gaze and then holding it there. Once again, we want to be careful of our neck and not crunch any of the vertebrae there. Once again, depends on your school. Tilt, lift, neutral, tuck, lift up. Of course, not overemphasizing that, which is going to help to reposition or position properly the atlas, which is the very top of the spinal column, and it's the most important one, and it's the most fragile one too. When we align our system, we create better conductivity for the nerves, because these are energy channels we're working with, and we want to hold our body in a way that's most conducive for energy transfer. And there are major points in the body that set this up. So we need this good foundation. We want the knees bent. We want a good posture in the hips, held low. We want the spine long, relaxed, shoulders down, no excessive tension anywhere in the body, everything open. And we want to open up many of the parts where the nervous system as well as the energy channels run through, so that we don't have any blockages in our system, and that the energies can begin to balance themselves and to communicate better. Final few points here. The tongue is at the roof of the mouth, typically at the roof of the mouth, and this is going to connect the energy channel I was talking about that runs in a circular orbit. So the primary governing vessel, what is called in the back, and then the conception vessel, they meet at the hard palate, and then the tongue is the other gate. So they touch one another, and it's like completing a circuit the energy can then circulate and travel around. If your tongue is off the roof of your mouth, you don't get that good energy exchange, and you'll release a lot more energy. That being said, if you ever want to release energy and make an energetic shift, sometimes you would take the tongue off for that particular purpose and then put it back there. Fine-tuning the energetic system in very subtle ways. The eyes, a few points on the eyes. I'll say you can have your eyelids open wide, halfway open, 90% closed, etc. And these may be, in your standing position. This gives you, we always talk about yang and yin in Qigong. So it's like eyes open is very yang, and then eyes closed is very yin, and then we can adjust depending on how we want to go. A point of practice in your Qigong meditation, and always, is be aware of your blinking rate. Very much related to your thinking patterns. People who are constantly thinking thoughts are often like blink, 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 change, change, change. When you stabilize your eyes and your eye blinks, you stabilize your mind. Because where your attention goes, your energy flows. So if your eyes are very sporadic and looking around, you're often in a hyper-aroused state where you're searching, whereas we want to bring the eyes into stability so that they're not constantly seeking, searching around. And when we do this, we may want to focus on a single point, like a drishti in yoga. And this will allow central vision, more of a sympathetic tone to develop, concentration, while maintaining peripheral vision or a widened view, horizontal view, which activates parasympathetic. So we're engaging both these systems. Once we stabilize that, focus in one point with a wide gaze, the visual system can relax. It's no longer seeking and searching. Then we'll relax the nerves, the cranial nerves that are associated with those eyes, and then we can still our mind a little bit more. Meditation cues. Final point here is the breath. We have a typically calm breath. Once again, it depends on the practice that you're doing. Some qualities of the breath that we want it in the lower belly. When we have good abdominal engagement, the inner core unit, and the engagement of the pelvic floor, and the closing in of the anal sphincter I didn't mention, this keeps the qi in the lower dantian or the low belly. About 2/3 in the low belly, 1/3 in the chest is a nice full way of breathing. And we want to breathe very softly, not too controlled, and as if I were to put a feather underneath the nose. We want to breathe so quietly and so gently that it would not blow the feather while breathing in or out. So let's go through all those. Standing, 4 points to the feet on the ground, knees slightly bent, every joint in your body slightly open, relaxed. Slight tuck of the tailbone with a sinking down of the hips, lower spine long, whole spine relaxed. The abdominal unit slightly engaged, low belly slightly pulling in, breathing into the lower abdomen. Shoulders relaxed, all the joints open, all the fingers of the hands open. Chin is gently tucked in, tongue is to the roof of the mouth. The eyes, choose your focus, choose how low you want your eyelids, awareness of the eyes, where they're looking, searching, awareness of the blinking, and then steadying or witnessing the breath. These are the points of standing meditation. There are several more that you can go over, but this is a very pragmatic, practical list, and you can utilize these points wherever you're at, in your standing and in your walking, to help to stabilize your mind, making your body more efficient. Thank you for watching. Aya Om.